Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of other virtual events coming up, including our Story Slam on Saturday, October 24th. We really need storytellers, and the theme is Hexed. So please sign up today, which you can do on our website, as well as sign up for our other upcoming events. And that's also where you can purchase tonight's book, The Wartime Sisters. A reminder that your audio and video should please remain turned off. Any questions can be sent to me via chat, and I will relay as many as possible to Lynda and Jenna after the presentation, or maybe Jenna will read them off the screen, whatever we decide works best. We're excited to welcome Lynda and Jenna, and I want to tell you a little bit about them, and then I will turn the event over to them. Lynda Cohen Loigman grew up in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. She received a BA in English and American Literature from Harvard College and a JD from Columbia Law School. Lynda's debut novel, Two Family House, was a USA Today bestseller and a nominee for the Goodreads 2016 Choice Awards in historical fiction. Her second novel, The Wartime Sisters, the book of tonight's discussion, was selected as a Women's World Book Club pick and a Best Book of 2019 by Real Simple magazine. She is currently at work on her third novel. Jenna Blum is the New York Times and #1 international best-selling author of the novels Those Who Save Us, The Storm Chasers, and The Lost Family. She was voted one of the favorite contemporary women writers by Oprah.com readers. Jenna is based in Boston, where she earned her MA from Boston University and has taught fiction and novel workshops for Grove Street writers for 20 years. She is the CEO and co-founder of the literary social media company A Mighty Blaze. And on that note, I will leave you and turn it over to them.
Hi, thank you, Stacy. I will talk first, I guess. So welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many friends and readers here. So excited. I know some of you had told me via social media that you were going to be here tonight. And I was like, oh, they're just kidding. They might or they might not be here. But you're here, and I'm so excited to see you all. Thank you. Welcome. Now I just am in full screen and I don't know how to get out. And if you guys can hear my puppy Henry Higgins squeaking his toys in the background, please pop it in the chat, because he has just discovered that, like, when I'm online, he likes to squeak his toys and compete with me. Stacy and Belmont, thank you for having us. I so wish we could do this in person. I was supposed to interview Lynda at Belmont in March when the paperback of the Wartime Sisters first came out. And I was so excited because I love Lynda and I also love Belmont, which was founded by a couple of really dear friends of mine, Kathy Crowley and Chris Abuzide. And so I'm like so sad that I can't be there, but they're still open. So you guys order all your books from Belmont, please. They need your support, as every indie bookstore does. You should definitely get this. You should also get this from Belmont, like right now, and hopefully they'll put links in the chat. Oh yeah, I recognize that book. Okay, I might put myself on mute, but Lynda, hi, I adore you. Hi, you're here. Hi,
we're here. I know so for the benefit of the other people who came in, we got in the little room, the Zoom room, a little bit early, and we were giving each other virtual hugs because I love Jenna. She's, well, you all know, I think most of you are big readers and followers, and you've seen her, like, she's the new Zoom celebrity of the book world and the hardest working woman in show business, because you've been working tirelessly to promote books. And so I know we're all so appreciative. I'm so appreciative of everything that you're doing. When we first said we were going to do this, you didn't have this other, like, 40-hour-a-week day job, which you now have. So it's an enormous task, and you're so good at it. And we all, like, you're really bringing a lot of joy to everyone. So thank you to you. And thank you. I will also thank Belmont Books. Thank you to Stacy at Belmont. And also, you guys, you should definitely buy books from Belmont Books. But also, Stacy just told me they have some new t-shirts and sweatshirts, because you probably need leisure wear. And so you might as well buy leisure wear from your favorite independent bookstore. So do that too. That would be really nice.
That is such a good idea. And yes, we all need leisure wear with elastic waistbands, because
yes.
COVID, because politics, because books on the couch. And I know Belmont actually has this fantastic selection of impulse items that are a little harder to buy online, but they have those saucy socks, like the socks that say on the bottom, "Don't bother me, I'm reading," like those socks, just the Susie Q socks. So you should definitely buy all of those from the store. Buy everything from the store. Buy food from the store. Like buy everything from the store. Yes, thank you, Henry. Okay, let's go. Okay, I have captured this from the dog. Barry is going away. Okay, so Lynda, if you can ignore the madness that is my life, can you please tell us a little bit about the Wartime Sisters? I've had the great privilege of reading it. My blurb is on the front cover. I mean, every word of this.
It is.
Heartfelt and poignant, Wartime Sisters shows the strength of women on the home front, which is one of the things that differentiates this book for me from all the other World War II books out there. To endure, to fight, and to help each other survive. What could be more timely than this, than like the power of women helping each other through something difficult? So can you please introduce your book for us?
Sure. I mean, so the thing I love about this book is the title, which I didn't think of. It was someone at St. Martin's Press who thought of the title, The Wartime Sisters. So it's about biological sisters who are very, very different, who have very different family expectations placed upon them. But it is also set during World War II, at the beginning of World War II. And so it is a home front story, and it is sisters who are at war with each other, while at the same time, the country is at war. And it's also about this greater sisterhood of women who lived and worked at the Springfield Armory at the start of the war. And, we all know that sort of picture of Rosie the Riveter that we have. And we all know how women made such tremendous contributions to the defense industry and just did all these jobs that the men were not there to do. So there's a good bit of that in it too. And it was a really fun thing to research. I'm from a little town, Longmeadow, near Springfield, which is where the Springfield Armory was. So I grew up like 15 minutes away from it. And it was a super fun thing to go there and to research the armory and to walk the grounds and to be there with the curator of the museum and to speak with him. And so it was a little bit of like a returning home, even though of course I didn't live there during wartime, but that's really, it's less of a war story than it is a family story. But for people who are really true historical fiction buffs, it's there. And there's a lot of fun detail about the armory.
There's definitely a lot of fun research detail. And I've heard you talk before about your research. I love hearing about this, but I'm wondering if you could, since we're not in the store and people can't thumb through the tangible books that they have, to sort of browse it.
Yeah.
Do you mind reading us
Sure.
like your favorite page of the book?
Okay. I have a little section. I think it's kind of a good introduction to the book. So again, it's about two sisters, Millie and Ruth. Millie is the younger sister. She is the beauty. She is the one who's really allowed to be flaky, allowed to be emotional. And her mother has this idea that she's going to have this incredibly glamorous life one day, and that she's going to really marry well and do amazing things. The older sister, Ruth, is really different. She's serious. She's the rule follower. She's the responsible one. She is all those things that a lot of times first children seem to be, but her mother has a very different expectation for her. And she's chosen to marry a man who their mother feels is just kind of a boring guy. He's a scientist. He's slightly overweight. He shows up on their first date like with a giant plant. And she can't even see like past the greenery to his face, instead of showing up with, a nice manageable bouquet of roses. So he's a little bit of a mess. And the mother is, it's fine. Her daughter's getting married, but Millie's really going to marry someone special. So this scene is a little scene right before the wedding, right before Ruth's wedding, when their mother decides she's going to give Ruth a little gift for her wedding, like that sort of something borrowed, something blue kind of thing. A week before the wedding, Ruth's mother took out her jewelry box. She set the worn wooden case on the kitchen table and motioned for Ruth to sit down beside her. Inside the case was a collection of familiar gold and silver pieces. By most people's standards, they ranged from worthless to modest, but when Ruth had been young, she thought each one was priceless. Her mother rummaged through the contents and handed Ruth a pair of clip-on earrings, 2 golden flowers with tiny garnet centers. "These are yours now," her mother said. "You're something old for the wedding." Ruth had seen the earrings on her mother 100 times. She wore them for every holiday, for every shiva call and funeral. You should always wear a nice piece of jewelry to the cemetery, her mother liked to say, so everyone should know you're not dead yet. Ruth fastened the flowers to her ears and kissed her mother's cheek. You don't have to give them to me. They can be my something borrowed. You can loan them to me for the day. What are you saying, that I can't give my daughter a gift? Besides, I always meant for you to have these earrings. We'll get them polished tomorrow and they'll look as good as new. I'll take my brooch in too. You know, the one with the pearls. Now, where did I put it? She picked her way slowly through the small mound of trinkets, but she couldn't seem to find the item that she was seeking. Let me try, Ruth suggested, pulling the jewelry box toward her. She untangled the necklaces, pulled out the bracelets, and removed all of the earrings until she reached the bottom layer. Here it is, she said finally, handing her mother the pin. A simple golden circle surrounded by pearls the size of apple seeds. But before putting the other pieces back inside, Ruth spotted a black velvet pouch tucked into the corner. Made of the same fabric as the box's interior, it was easy to miss. Ruth turned the pouch over onto her open palm. The ring that fell out was one she'd never seen before. Thick, polished platinum with a center opal surrounded by diamonds. Ruth stared at the ring for a long time before she spoke. It was obviously valuable, worth far more than the rest of the jewelry combined. Where did this come from? I never told you about that ring before? It was my grandmother Fanny's from her first husband in Russia. He was a jeweler, much, much older than she was. 2 days after their wedding, his favorite horse keeled over in the middle of the street, and a week after that, he dropped dead himself. The jeweler's family told everyone Fanny was cursed. All the bad luck was her fault, they said. Fanny was no fool. She knew she had no future in that town, so she booked her passage on a ship to New York the very next day. She sewed her husband's watch into her coat pocket and that ring into her brassiere. She didn't tell anyone in New York that she'd been married before. My grandfather didn't even know until my mother was born. And she kept the ring all that time? Ruth's mother shrugged. She told my mother the ring reminded her to be strong. She came here all alone and she built a whole new life. It's beautiful, Ruth said, holding it up to the light. Why don't you ever wear it? She set the ring down on the table, but her eyes lingered on the stone. Her mother laughed. Me? Where would I wear something so fancy? No, your sister is the one who will need that ring. After she gets married, she'll have dinners and parties. Ruth sucked in her breath. The clips from her earrings dug into the lobes, and the pain radiated outward until her whole head throbbed. You've been saving it for Millie, then. Why am I not surprised? Ruth unclipped the flowers from her ears and placed them next to the ring. Beside the magnificent opal and the glittering diamonds, the garnet specks and scuffed petals were lifeless and dull. Her disappointment gave way to despair. Ruth rubbed her ears. She could feel the dents in her skin where the posts from the earrings had pinched them too tightly. Ruth, her mother pleaded, don't take them off. They look perfect on you. Keep them on for a while. But Ruth stood from her chair and left the earrings where they were. No, thank you, Mama, she answered. So that's a little bit of a taste of what they're both dealing with, with their mother, just thinking of them so differently and trying to put them in little boxes. And one of the things that I was really thinking about when I was writing this story was that idea of family roles and the boxes that we're put in when we're young, and whether we can ever break free from them when we get older. Are we ever going to be able to become something other than the people who knew us when we were young say that we are?
Such a great premise. And I can't help wondering, I have so many questions to ask you that are like the writer's sausage making questions about research and about family stories. But do you have a piece of jewelry that has that kind of significance for you that was handed?
I don't, because I am not, my mother was one of 3 sisters, so they all did. There was a lot, I think you find this a lot. I've spoken to a lot of women about this, and in their families, jewelry can be like a big cause of, fighting and arguments and hurt feelings and all kinds of stuff like that. So not for me, because I have a brother, but I don't have a sister. So it's not like there was something that I wanted that my mother passed away 12 years ago, but there's not like there was something that I wanted that she didn't leave me because I was the only girl. And even when she passed away, my brother wasn't married yet. So there was no issue. But being one of 3 sisters, there were a lot of things that my grandmother had that they all kind of wanted this thing or that thing. So it was interesting. And in fact, when my mother died, my mother had a ring that was her mother's. And when my mother died, that became I gave that to one of her sisters. And then in order to not, I didn't want the other sister to feel bad. So I gave her one of my mother's bracelets. It wasn't like my mother had such a huge jewelry collection. She didn't. But they each got something. But there was a diamond ring in my family that my grandmother had. And it was probably like the worst quality. It probably like was it, who knows if
It was like
even
this.
real?
It was like my fabulous, like that my friend gave me that I wear every day, and I love it because my friend gave it to me. But it's like, you know what, you guys, this is not real. Probably. I mean, it might be, but probably
I
not.
think that this diamond was not that pretty because I think it was like yellowing and like probably cracked, but it was called, if there was some relative whose last name was Polishuk. So we called it the Polishuk diamond. And it was like the Hope diamond in our, like, you know, there's the Hope, the diamond, the curse of the Hope diamond. So we would always talk about the curse of the Polishuk diamond. And I kind of wanted to write a story like about the curse of the Polishuk diamond, but I haven't done that yet. But that was the ring. I don't even know where that ring is
I was
now.
going to say, what happened to that ring? You know, my
I
mom,
think
now
it
that
Yeah, I think I think it became the engagement ring for one of my cousins.
and what happened to that cousin?
She's around, no, she's married, she's happily married. Yeah. So,
Okay.
but she has not been cursed. I think we broke the polished diamond curse.
Okay.
It's
This
all
is
good.
good.
Yeah.
This is good. It's so funny. I was thinking that, like, while you were talking about this opal ring that my mom had, that she had as an engagement ring from my dad, and she thought it was such bad luck that she actually buried it out in our backyard in Montclair, New Jersey, when I was growing up, in the hole in some tree roots, like under a sycamore tree in our backyard. And she sort of tossed this mention of it off the cuff when I was 11 or 12. So of course I was like digging holes in our backyard like a squirrel trying to find it. And I did find it. It was this beautiful
Oh my
ring. She
gosh.
didn't buried it in a box or anything, just stuck it in the dirt. And I bought it into the house, and it was this gorgeous opal. And she was like, "What is that doing in the house? Get it out of the house." And, you know, now I have no idea what happened to it. But
Oh my God.
and
That's
I
so funny because, so for those who are listening, Jenna and I have birthdays one day apart. Jenna you're the 6th, right?
am
You're
the
the 6th of the 8th. Okay, so I'm the 7th, you're the 8th.
yes.
And so we're both Libras, right?
Yeah.
We're both Libras. And my mother, and the opal is the birthstone for Libras. And my
Yeah.
mother used to talk about opals and how they were bad luck my whole life. And she would never let me have an opal, like a little, you know, like opal necklace or nothing, because she like would talk about some woman who like had an opal and then she, you know, like terrible things would happen to her. I was never allowed to have anything opal.
Me
And
either. It's so weird. And I'm like, but it's mine. Does that mean I'm bad luck? That is not cool. So I wanted to know, like, what in the chat later, like what everybody has that's an heirloom and the story behind the heirloom. The only thing I have is that from my mom, I have like this tiny little, she was a Phi Beta Kappa.
Oh,
And
that's so
so
nice.
when she passed, I was the one thing I wanted, and I wanted it instantly, with like
Yeah.
a sort of a physical greed for no reason. She was very proud of it, and I was like, that's the only thing I wanted for her. So if I just have that, I'll be happy. And I never take it off ever. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm in the
Yeah.
shower or in the ocean, like just it never ever comes off. So
When my mom died, it's interesting because when I read for the Two Family House, I always read, there's a passage that I read about a recipe box. Yeah, there's exactly. So
I
there's
know
a
so many
passage.
people love this in the chat. They're like, I love Linda's books. I read both of the books multiple times. Like,
Oh,
okay.
I'm not good at looking at the chat while I'm talking, so I apologize everyone if I'm not looking at the chat.
It's my one eye.
But in that book, there's a scene where I read where the character is like looking through her mother's recipe box. And when my mom died, she died in Florida, and I went down to Florida and I was with my dad, and I was with her when she died. And then like 2 days later, I was, you know, going with my dad back up to New York, and he was trying to give me her jewelry. And I was like, I don't want any of that now. I wanted the recipe box because that was my mother to me. And so I took the recipe box and I packed that in my suitcase, and that's what I brought up to New York with me. And to me, that's her. When I hold that recipe box, that's like your Phi Beta Kappa pin. You know, I hold that box and it's like this dented, ugly, like stained, like Betty Crocker tin box from like the 1960s. And that's my thing. That's what I have. That's her to me.
I would love to see that if you like run
You know what? I feel bad. I'm not at home in New York. I would have. I'm in Massachusetts right now. So I'm on Martha's Vineyard, but so I'm up. There's an ocean between us, but another time I will hold that up. I will hold up that box. So
that would be amazing. And I know we had talked a little bit in the green room about baking our way through COVID. And I know, like, you, like me, are a baker, and I bake when I am feeling stressed by being on a screen for 12 hours a day. I think I just want to do something tangible And I go into the kitchen, I bake something, and then I give it away to people because I don't really have a sweet tooth. So people.
That's why you look like that, and that's why I can't. That's my
Oh, honey, but I eat
I
pizza.
don't give it away.
No, I eat. I'm a cheese. Like cheese has
Oh.
gotten me through COVID, so I eat plenty of that. But what is your favorite recipe that your mom gave you?
Oh, there's a couple. I mean, there's an apple cake that I love. There was a recipe in there was a coffee cake that was my grandmother's coffee cake that my mother always made. My grandmother's name was Tilly, so we always in my family we call it Tilly cake. So it's like a chocolate chip, cinnamon, sour cream coffee cake. But there was an apple cake that was my mom's specific recipe that I love. Yeah.
Will you
it's a
please
good-
send me? I mean, will you please send
Yeah.
Belmont the recipe to disseminate?
Yes,
some
of
of this?
course.
Because I actually have apples in my
Yeah.
kitchen I wanted to make. Okay, so let's get away from food. You know, like I'm basically like a yellow lab. Like I think about food all the time. So talk to me a little bit more about the research that you did for the Wartime Sisters, because you guys, it's so engrossing to hear Lynda talk about the research for the book. And do you start with research when you're writing, or do you start with the story first?
So this book was really strange because, I mean, my first book was categorized as historical fiction, but I never really, it wasn't World War II historical fiction. It wasn't like serious historical fiction. It was set in the 50s and 40s. So like, yes, it was set in the past, but I wasn't really thinking of it so much that way. So that book was inspired by my mom's childhood in Brooklyn. But when she was 18 years old, her family moved from Brooklyn to Springfield. So when I went to write my second book, I was just going to sort of like follow her life, her pattern, start in Brooklyn, go to Springfield. And it was going to be this book set in the 60s. And it was going to be about sisters who were moving from a big city to a small one and what that was like. Because when they moved, they felt like they were exiled to Siberia. They felt like there was no one there. It was like they were in the middle of nowhere. And they left everyone behind. I always say that those stories were told in the language of loss, like all the stories about their move, because the stories were about everyone that they left behind, all their friends, all their family. So they got to Springfield, and that was the story I was going to write. And it was going to be about family relationships, and it was going to be about being left behind. Because I actually found out, like shortly before I started writing that book, that my mom, her whole family went to Springfield. She was in her senior year of high school. She stayed behind for a little bit. And it was kind of awful because her family was gone. And then they were also like having terrible phone calls with her. Like, we're in this terrible place. See you soon. Like, so there was this sense of dread, I think, that she was having to join them in this terrible place. So that was the story I was going to write. And I had this idea for a backstory for one character that it was going to be an older woman, and she was going to have worked at the Springfield Armory during World War II when she was a young woman. And that was it about the Armory. It was going to be like a paragraph. It was going to be a page. But like even when you have a minor character, you can't just write about a woman working at the Armory when it's a real place without doing a little research. So then I was like, okay, I'll do a little bit of research about this place so I can figure out even what her job was. But then, a little research is so dangerous. You start finding out. Yeah, it just like you start finding out things. So I found this website called Forge of Innovation, and there were 24 recorded interviews with men and women who had worked and lived at the Armory. Because when I was growing up, I had heard about the Army. I didn't really know. I just pictured it. I thought it was like a big giant factory, and that was it. But it wasn't. It was like this beautiful campus which is actually a college campus now. It's Springfield Technical Community College now. But there were officers who lived there. There were like 30 officers at any given time who lived there often with their families. And there were these beautiful grounds and gardens, and the Works Progress Administration, had greenhouses and beautiful trees. It looked like a park. And there were fountains, there were tennis courts, there was a swimming pool. So when I listened to these interviews, the first thing was just the women. I mean, there was such a sense of camaraderie. They were all from all different backgrounds, all different ages. There was an 18-year-old woman who had been a single mother. There was a woman interviewed who was the wife of a commanding officer, like a good inspiration for my character, Lillian. There were all different kinds of stories, but the common thread between all of them was this idea that they were so proud to have served their country. They were so thrilled to have done their part. It was, for a lot of them, it was their first job. For many of them, it was the only job that they ever had. But they never forgot it for their entire lives. The the interviews were recorded in the 1980s. So they were already very old by the time those interviews were made. And they looked back on this with such love and it was like this most special time of their life. And when I heard all these stories, I couldn't let them go. So then I was like, I'm setting the story 20 years back. I'm going to start it in the 40s, and I'm going to have the sisters move there. And it's going to be a whole other thing. It's going to be about these sisters and their family and all of the pressures of their family and the stuff that goes on. But it's also going to be about some of those other women and how a sisterhood works, And so I went to the army. I did a lot of online research. I read books about the army, and then I went there. So I went there July of 2016 was the first time I went. And I met with the curator, and it was super, it was funny because the curator of the Armory Museum it's like run by the National Park Service. So he's a ranger. Like the people who run it are rangers. And like he has this big bushy beard and he's this awesome guy. But I get there and I'm like, hi, I'm going to write a book about it here. I'm going to write a book about this place. And I think he thought I was just off my rocker. And he did not know what to do with me. And it was really, but we had a great day. And he took me into some of the home, what were the dwellings for the officers. And I got to go into the commanding officer's house, which is Lillian's house in the story, because that was a real place. And he was really funny because he just kind of wasn't sure what I wanted to see. Mm-hmm. And I was, like when you walk the grounds of the place that you're writing about, you don't really know what you want to see either at first. The first time you go, I went 3 times. The first time you go, you're getting the lay of the land and you're sort of trying to see what sparks a spark. Where is the story coming from? What is like a fascinating thing? So he's walking me through this giant old house. And then he's like, do you want to see the cellar? So I said, okay. We go down. He shows me like where the coal chute is, and it's this dark place. And he does not know what kind of books I write. So he's like, I think you should put the dead body there. That's so it's not that kind of book. There are no dead bodies. So
what he read was like mostly mysteries and thrillers, probably, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously there's got to be a murder in this book somewhere.
So fun, yeah. But what the fun thing was that later on, when the book came out, he and I had so much fun together because there were weird research rabbit holes that I would go down, right? So like I became obsessed with how did they get mail at the Armory, and then I would email him, and then he would call me, and we would try to figure out like how the whole mail system worked, and then we'd be like, we don't know, and we just I would drop it, but we became really friendly, and when I did, I went to Springfield for the launch of the hardcover, and he came and spoke with me too, so we both spoke, and he kind of gave a thing about the Armory, and yeah, and then actually at the Armory, there was another ranger there, Ranger Sue, who loves books. So she started a book club there, and she was giving Wartime Sisters tours at the Armory for people, which is
I love
really
it.
Yeah.
Did you ever go and lead a tour?
I didn't go. I know I didn't go because it was it came out in the winter, and she was doing the book clubs, and she never asked me to go and lead a tour. Actually, it'd be fun. I mean, maybe hopefully. It was her thing. Like, I don't think I would be so great at leading the taking people around the Armory, but it would be fun to go and be a special guest on the tour. I don't know.
Yeah, you could just go incognito, like wearing a disguise, and see like what you learned and what people thought of the book. And there's so many comments in the chat about people loving the book and also loving Two Family House, which I wanted to ask about.
I can, stop talking and read all the comments, but I can't.
No. I will collate them for you and just tell you like there's all the love, and people are like very into the idea of the family recipes and the house and the secrets.
Oh, you're so good. And also, let's just talk about. Let's just hold up your book for 1 minute, because Jenna, if you don't know Jenna and you haven't read this book, Jenna actually cooked. This is about, well, one of the main characters is Peter, and he owns a wonderful restaurant in the 70s called Masha's, and Jenna cooked all of the recipes, invented all of the recipes for everything that gets eaten in this book. So if you're really into recipes, you should read this. This is the book to read.
There's a menu in the book, and then you can email me for your favorite recipe, and I will write it down for you because I invented them all, and so I don't write them down unless somebody asks. But then I'm like, oh, I guess I should actually write that down. But yeah, food is very important, I think. And for me, it was like a way of procrastinating. Actually, was to create that menu, but I try to do what you do, which is I research things by talking to people, by interviewing, by reading books, but also by getting into the physical atmosphere of a book as much as possible. So I love that you went to the Armory. Can we talk about the relationships in the Wartime Sisters and also in the Two Family House? Like, I'm really interested that you have these very strong relationships between women and women who are very different. That seems to me to be a sort of a recurring theme in your work, in your oeuvre. Do you want to talk about why that is? Why do you think that is?
I think some of it is just because when I was growing up, my mom had these two sisters. And so when there are three sisters, somebody's always on the outs, right? Like three is not a great number. And so they loved each other. My mom was the oldest. And then she had a sister who's 2 years younger than her, and then one 14 years younger than her. So they were all really different. And in fact, the one who was 14 years younger is sort of more like my older sister now than my aunt, and almost a different generation from my mom. And I was just fascinated by their relationship. I don't have a sister myself. I was just like, I feel like I was a student of their relationship for my whole childhood. I would just watch the three of them interact, and I would like listen in on the telephone, back when there were landlines and you could like be up in your room and listen in and no one would know you were listening in. I used to do that all the time. So
Yeah.
I think I was fascinated with sisters, with the idea of sisters-in-law. My dad's sister actually lived in our town growing up, so she was around too. So I don't know, it's just something that, one thing that I always observed that I just thought about a lot was when they would fight, there are always two sides or three sides in their case to every story. And so when there was always somebody who would point out something else because there were three of them. So you would have like this full circle viewpoint, and I learned that you have to kind of really consider what everyone else is thinking, what everyone else is feeling. And I don't know, that certain things about their lives when I was young really stuck with me. There was a Thanksgiving when, I don't think it was a Thanksgiving, but my mother made a turkey. It was they were always getting together. And so we used to say, Janice, my mother, Janice is always early, Barbara is always late, and Shelley sometimes doesn't come at all. And so Shelley was the youngest one. But they were all coming over, and my mother was making a turkey, and she was like getting this turkey out of the oven and basting this turkey. And the middle one was like hounding her about something. I think she brought her a present. Ooh, that's my dog. I think she brought her a present, and she really wanted my mother to open this present immediately. And my mother was more concerned with the turkey, and they ended up having this huge fight. And then she walked out, but late I remember the unraveling of that argument. And because I didn't know why she was so mad, why did she leave? My mother clearly was like up to her like kishkas in Turkey, and and she's holding this present, open it. And what was it about that present and about all of that? Like, why would my mother not put down the turkey? Why was she so insistent that the present had to be opened then? Why did she get so angry that my mother wouldn't open it then? And the whole unpacking of that episode. And there were a lot of things like that I observed when I was growing up, and they all are great. It's a great lesson for a storyteller. When you think like a novelist, which I didn't know that I was or that I would be, you're always asking why is this person acting this way? Why is this person feeling this way? And so it comes from that.
I was going to ask you if you had had your own sister, if maybe it would be less imperative to write about it. I feel as though when I'm writing about things, it's because there's a question to which I don't have an answer, right? The why thing. So a novel for me is a question that I try to answer over the course of the novel, or at least set the question out in front of the reader so the reader can answer it for his or herself. And I don't ever really find the answer. I'm just presenting different points of view. So with my first book, the question was, why are people so mean to each other? And that probably is like, the question that all my books are asking in one way or another. Do you think that for you, a novel starts with something that you actually don't have or are curious about and then are trying to shade in?
I don't know. It gets to that point. It doesn't start with that. It starts with a story idea. It starts with some sort of weird what if plot thing. So like the Two Family House was a very specific question that, what if there was one, relations, brothers, sisters, somebody had all boys, somebody had all girls, each wanted what the other didn't have, what would happen? What would happen there? And the Wartime Sisters was kind of, what happens when two sisters just don't get along and their parents set them up with this terrible, their parents contributed in that story so much to their failed relationship, the mother especially. What happens when a mother does that, and what can they ever overcome that? Can they ever see each other differently from how they were seen when they were young? So it's more of like a what if thing, but all those questions, like you're saying, they come in pretty quickly. They follow very quickly on the heels of the what if. And then there are certain things that I'll always be putting in my work, I think. And I think because I lost my mother, I know you lost your mother too. When you lose your mother, that is a huge thing. And it does, you write mother characters, you think about motherhood, you think about, I don't know, I do have so many questions. If I had a sister, I'm not sure how different my writing would be. Some people have told me that it's really good that I don't have a sister, because if I did, then she would be forever angry with me because I've written about sisters and sister-in-laws. But
or you could be best friends. You never know. Like I've seen the variation with sisters so many times. Like my sister, I have a sister, and nobody even knows this because we don't talk about each other very much in public, but she's also a writer. She writes nonfiction.
I didn't know. See, I didn't know that.
Her name is Leslie Bloom with an E, like Judy Bloom. And she wrote a book called Fallout that's just out like now. That's probably at Belmont. But we were always super competitive, but our mom set us up that way, right? So like it's such an interesting thing, but I love her fiercely, like viciously, with like tiger fierceness love, so I'm like, okay, it's probably good that we don't write the same thing, because then I would have to kill her, like I'm the oldest, so that would happen. But like sort of carved out separate kingdoms, I can do it. But it is, the sibling relationship is so interesting to me and so complicated. And the mom thing, like, don't get me started, like whole different discussion. We could be here for 6 hours, but I'm fascinated by this because ever since my mom passed, I don't write mom characters. I feel like
interesting, right?
I'm looking at an eclipse in some way when I try and look at my mom, because she was like such a huge personality, like a tiny little body, an enormous personality, that I kind of feel like when I look for her, I see only the penumbra of her personality. And it's going to be like, I want to write about her, but it has to be like a huge basket to put her in, like a huge fictional basket, like big enough to contain that personality. And I haven't found.
It's a shorter time for you too. Like it's been 13 years for me.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like it with time, questions arise, and you become more comfortable with absence. You just do. Absence is always painful, but you settle into it like an uncomfortable chair. That's what it becomes. And then people start telling you things. What I found is my aunts tell me things that I never knew. Like I never knew that my mom didn't move with them to Springfield immediately. So you find out things after the fact, and then those create more questions. And I don't know. It's not even always questions. It's just there are little rich details of my mother's life, and I feel very honored to drop them in to things that people might read. It's just like, hi mom. It's just like a little hello here and there. And they're little things that I put in. And I think that readers sometimes have a really difficult time separating an author's real life from what they write about, and they think that you're writing everything that's true and everything that happened, and that's not how it works. I mean, that is how it works for some writers. It's not how it works for me. But there are truths. There are real life things and truths in my books, because I don't even know what else I would do if I didn't have them. Like they add all the layers. So that's where all the layers come from.
I love that. Yeah, I think of that as like the Easter egg hunt. If you like forgive this, like my mom was not Jewish, my dad was Jewish, so like I have my Easter egg hunt thing. But one of the great privileges of being a writer is that you get to encode into your work the things that you loved, whether it's about your mom or a house or a dog or a place or a person, boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, who knows. But like just recipes, like just things that you loved that you stitch into the fabric of your books. And like I have in my first book, the banisters in the heroine's childhood house have hearts carved into them. And that was my family home in Montclair. So just little things like that. And then you get to preserve them forever. And hopefully they live on in the minds of readers, which I really love. So people are asking questions in the chat, which is amazing. And they want to know what we like to read. So I'm going to flip that right over to you. What are you reading now? Or can you read?
Yes. Okay. Well, you know what? I am reading some, but I'm also listening to audiobooks, which I never used to do before, but I've been driving a lot. And also just walking a lot, because I find that like being outside is the one thing that makes me feel better. So I walk my dog a lot. So I just listened to the most amazing story, The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, which I have to say is probably one of my favorite books of the whole year. And Julia Whalen is the narrator on the audiobook. She's unbelievable, like just amazing. So that was a great story. It's a I don't know if I'd call it fantasy, a little fantasy-ish. A woman is sort of cursed and no one remembers her. She can't leave her mark in the world at all. And then she goes into a bookstore and the man remembers her. And so why does he remember her? So that is a fantastic book. I just started reading this one, The Once and Future Witches.
Oh, cool. What a cover. I love it.
Yeah, it's a great character. It's a great cover. So this is like, it's a story of like witchcraft and suffrage. It's like they're fighting for women's rights, but it's really, really clever. It's Alex Harrow's book, and she wrote a book that I loved last year called The 10,000 Doors of January. I've been reading like more things that are not in my genre, because I don't know, I've been so like anxious and antsy. And so I find that like reading in this more sort of fantasy world a little bit is helping me to just block out what's happening. So that's what I've been reading lately. Yeah. What have you been reading?
I mean, honestly, ever since I started in Mighty Blaze, I don't read any of the books that I
right.
promote because there are so many books. And I don't, so people are like, oh, I'm sure you're reading all the books you're promoting for the Blaze. And I'm like, I haven't read a book since March.
How could you? You've been working so hard.
I don't have the time. Like, so,
no.
I mean, basically, and it's hard because I have a massive list of books that I want. And the great thing about working for the Blaze, there are many great things about working for the Blaze. Mostly the authors I get to talk to all day, every day, which is freaking fantastic. I almost swore. It's freaking fantastic. But I have like a massive book list as a result of that as well. Just the incredible books that passed our threshold like every Tuesday when the books come out. They're fantastic. So I have managed to finish 2 books since I started the Blaze to read them, and one of them is Sue Miller's latest, which is Monogamy, which I loved, and we had Sue Miller on the Blaze as a Friday frontliner, and I love everything she writes. And so I'm like, oh, good. I just get to sit in this world that is so beautifully and discreetly described. And I'm in the middle of where I'm like maybe 25 pages from finishing Lily King's Writers and Lovers.
Oh, that one was beautiful. I loved that.
I like it a lot. And you know what's funny about it to me is like, it feels like a book that I would have read in my 20s and yearned toward, right? So it's almost like a snapshot of myself as I was in my 20s and the writer I wanted to be in my 20s. And it's surprising to me because she's such a sophisticated writer, and yet the character is just very
young.
Naive,
right?
So it's like a little time machine, that book. And I want to read this week. Elizabeth Berg is my comfort food writer. Like, she's like my chicken soup for the soul writer, and I get to interview her next week for her pub day. So I'm going to read her memoir about her parents, which is called I'll Be Seeing You, which is very like of this period, and about her parents' their very long marriage and what makes that work. And so I'd like to sort of switch over from fiction to memoir. What did you read when you were a kid is one of the questions that we have in the chat. Like, your favorite when you were
I guess, it's funny because I don't think of myself as like a fantasy person, but I guess like secretly I am. Like, I love The Hobbit. I love The Hobbit. I loved this book, Half Magic, and all of the
Oh, I loved Half Magic.
Yeah. I loved that. I feel like I would have, if I had been young when Harry Potter came out, I would have been the biggest, like, hugest Harry Potter fan ever. That was like the kind, I wanted to write a book like Half Magic. I wanted to write a book about children in the countryside who something magical happens to. So, and then, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which, like, that's just a classic, but I had my mother's copy of that when I was little, and I read that so many times, and I still read it. I still reread it, every once in a while. And you just more things, what you understand when you read that book and you're 10 or 12 is so different from what you understand, when you're 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, all the, and also, well, I didn't read this until probably I was like 16, but Marjorie Morningstar, which is like another one of those books.
I just read that. I loved it. Oh
That's another one of those books that, like, if you reread it, over and over, the things that stand out to you are just, and I read all the Judy Blum books, I loved all those. Those were all the best. Yeah.
I love Marjorie Morningstar. I just read it as an adult for the first time because Randy Susan Myers, whose work I also love, recommended it, and it was of the time I wanted to write about. And so, but I haven't found the movie for that yet. I have to order it as like a
I haven't ever watched the movie. I haven't ever watched the movie, that one.
Natalie Wood, I think, was in that, which would be amazing. But and also the Judy Blum books. I just reread. Actually, I did finish this book again, Tiger Eyes, because we had Judy Blum on the Blaze too, with and who interviewed her. Kimberly Hensley Lawrence, who's our bookstore interviewer, she read all of the Judy Blum books before that interview, like reread, and we had these discussions behind the scenes, like what would Margaret be doing now, and like coming up. And after that interview, like, Judy Blum got on. She was so great, and you guys can watch this all on the Blaze. It's still there. She was with her husband. And then, so we filmed the interview and we got off and she left the green room and we were like, oh my God, it was like a comet just came through here. And then Kimberly just like burst into tears crying because she was just like, oh my God, my whole life I wanted to meet that woman. So it's like people who influence you when you're a child and a teenager, like you can reread those books every year and they're such riches.
Yeah.
Right? Like I read Harriet the Spy every year. I reread it.
Oh, that's so nice.
It's my favorite children's books. And I actually take a passage from it to give to writers like novelists I work with now who are like novelists, like published novelists. But I think it has in the opening scene the best description of the way to set a scene ever, which is you play town. Like you describe the setting, you describe the people, and then you get into the action. And I still look at that as like a great way to get into a scene. So, I mean, there's so many books that I freaking love. Like one of my friends is having a baby on Monday by cesarean, and I just bought her a whole library on Bookshop, and it was like $5,000 later. I'm like, okay, you have to stop buying all the books, all the books, the Oz books, the Narnia books, whatever. Right? It's just crazy.
Oh yeah, I love the Narnia books. I love.
Well, if you like Half Magic, it's the same trope.
Yeah,
the four children who go through their closet and are like suddenly there's like Turkish delight. Like
I was obsessed with Turkish delight. I just didn't know what it was. I had no idea. My mother didn't know what it was. I was always asking for Turkish delight. She's like, I don't know what Turkish.
And did you like the first time you had it? Like I was also like the Narnia books were responsible for whole generations of children being obsessed with Turkish delight. I don't know what it was. And when I had it, I'm like, this is just hard jelly with some.
It's really not. It's not nothing so special.
Yeah, it was.
I know, but it sounded so exotic and it sounded so amazing and. Oh, I know. Yeah. See, that was the book that I always thought I would write. not that book, but I always thought I would write a children's book. Like I thought I would write something like that, but I never did. And I don't think I really can because I don't, it's just not, I can't do it. I don't know. Maybe one day, but I don't think so.
I don't know. People ask me the same thing. Would you ever write a children's book or something funny?
Right.
I think that as much as I love children's books, I don't feel I have the imagination for it because when I write fiction, the world building is the hardest part for me and what happens in the story. And also the same thing with writing something funny. Like I like to try to be funny in real life, but fiction is different. It's a deep dive into somebody's world and emotions, somebody who's different from me. So, but people in the chat really want you to write a children's book. So I think you could. Okay. So what is, somebody asked earlier this great question, like what is a story that you might want to work on at some point and it's not the right time for? Would that be?
Oh, I've already wrote that.
Oh, all right then. Wow.
No, yeah. I wrote a whole third book that will hopefully, that's kind of waiting now. That hopefully will see the light of day one day. But
you can tell us what it is, or like just like leak a little secret about it?
I mean, it's like okay. I will set it up this way. This is why I will set it up this way. For those of you who like Wicked, like, the musical Wicked and the book, I don't know if you've read that book, but it's an amazing book. It was a book before it was a musical, everybody. A fantastic book. All about, a prequel of the Wicked Witches of the West. So I wrote a book that I researched for a long time that I really love, and it is about a woman who is a sculptor, and she is from Italy, and she marries a man, and it is a turbulent relationship, and she leaves him at the end with a marble sculpture of a boy, and it is like a prequel to the Geppetto story. So she is the woman who was his wife. Yeah. So
why do we not get to read that?
Why? Because it's not quite in my. One of the hard things about being a writer, as you know, Jenna, is like sometimes like people want certain things at certain times. They want you to kind of like, keep your readers. I feel like all of you, would you follow that book? Would you like to read that book? It's not, this is a hard year to sell that book. It's a hard year because, as we know, like the book industry is suffering, and things are tough now. So this is not the right time for that book. And honestly, I wrote it. I do have to kind of rewrite it. It's not quite ready. So hopefully I will rewrite it. But I'm working on a different book now. That's more of another family story that I'm really excited about. So that, but yeah, that is a book that I wrote, and I would write another one like that. Like I would really like to. I love fairy tales. I love fairy tales, and so I have that one, and then I have an idea for another one. So one day those will be some books that I will write.
That's fantastic. I'm seeing people clapping for you, and in the chat, people are like, "I would read that in a hot second." They would climb that book like a tree if you wrote that book.
Yay! Okay, it'll one day, but right now I'm doing another one. So the other one, yeah.
Do you want to talk about the new one? Do you want to tell us what
I mean, it's very, very new. So I'm in like that, I'm in that like thinking stage. Like I take a really long time to think about a book, which sounds like so.
No, me too.
Thinking, but like, yeah. So like I'm walking, but I'm really writing my book in my head. And I need to sit with the characters for a very long time before they speak to me, before I feel that I know them, before I can give them that 3-dimensional, necessary oomph for them to pop. Like otherwise I can't just start writing them. So I've been thinking about them. But it's a book, it's a grandmother-granddaughter story. And the grandmother was a matchmaker in the Lower East Side, like in the 1920s. And the granddaughter sort of inherits her skills. But unfortunately, she is a very unsuccessful divorce lawyer when we meet her. So she is in the business of pulling people apart, but she keeps putting them back together. And she inherits some of her grandmother's notes and things. So
that's a great start. Is that going to be called The Matchmaker?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
I love that. I mean, I would just buy that. I'm fascinated by the whole like Yenta thing of like matchmaking people and putting them
so interesting. I've been doing so much research about it, and it's like crazy. They were like, it was all men, first of all. Like we all had this idea because of Fiddler on the Roof that like Yenta, like the matchmakers were women. But back then, early days, like when people were getting off the boat, it was men. It was really men. And like if you were an unmarried woman, you couldn't do it because the idea was like you might steal them for yourself. You had to be like
it was like a successful, like you had to have a track record, like, see, I did this and therefore I know how to do it. But no, you were like a thief.
You were a thief. You were a potential thief of eligible men for yourself. So yeah. So the character is like a real trailblazer and like a woman before her time because she is doing this and she's doing it when she's young and she's not married. But in order to do it, she has to kind of pretend that she doesn't ever want to get married and like even like spread some rumors that she's barren. So like she's like not gonna like otherwise no one will, So there are a lot of fun things. Like I've been researching, like if you look through the New York Times to try to find like crazy weddings from that time, like there were some crazy weddings and there are some fun things. There was the wedding of my favorite so far has been the wedding of the pickle millionaire's daughter.
Oh my God, that should be the title of the book. That's just amazing. There's so many things I could say about that title.
No, it's great.
It's not, but it's great. Okay, tell us about that wedding. I want to know. And when is this?
The best thing about that wedding was the write-up in the New York. There was a write-up in the New York Times about the pickle millionaire's daughter's wedding, and it said something like, "The smell of orange blossoms and jasmine mixed with the smell of pickled herring and pickles." Like it's like some crazy thing. And there were thousands of people in the street. It was just bonkers.
Oh and every pregnant woman at the wedding is vomiting from like,
exactly.
Pickles. So we have time for like a couple of more questions. I wanted to know, and also your audience wants to know, do you have a timeline for that book to be released or published? And like, what's
It's
your...
due, yeah. So it's due like in a year. It's due in September. So it'll come out in 2022. So hopefully, hopefully that gives us enough of like a cushion to um be able to go on real book tour
I know. Although
with
this is, I
people.
mean, I desperately sad not to be able to see you in person at Belmont, but also like there's so many people who are here because we can do
It
this.
is, yeah.
I'm hoping.
Yeah. Don't you think, I'm curious, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, I really feel like going forward, even when we're done with COVID, I feel like going forward, we're going to have to do these events more. Like it's going to have to be a hybrid. It's going to have to be both, because there has been you've created a demand. So how can you just like not have it? People are going to want it.
I mean, honestly, my business is now predicated on that. Like the Blaze is predicated on that. But I'm going to show you guys like a little bit of sausage making here. That my ring light, which I have to look so fabulous, is actually like this scary thing. It has like a little, oh, well, I just broke it. But it has like a little iPhone stand clampy thing. So my vision is when I'm lucky enough to come out and join everybody again in real life, everybody who I know, like you, Lynda, every writer who I know and love is going to have like something like this to stream an event for people who can't get there in person, who are far away, so that we can reach the people who are in our immediate audience in person and hug on them. Like I want to have a hug fest when the pandemic is over. I want to hug everybody I know for like 15 minutes at a time. But also I want to have all of this like streamed as well, right? So
I think there's going to have to be both, because it's so nice to be able to reach out to other people. And like you have a book event and then there's a blizzard. Like it's just nice to be able to have it both ways. We can have our cake and eat it too.
I totally agree. And by the way, this is what I look like without my ring light. I look like the Tin Man. I like something super blue and shiny, and people are like, "Is Jenna okay? Does she have COVID? She's very blue and shiny." So no ring light, y'all. Okay, so do you think that the whole crisis is a perfect time to write a book with so much time at home? Like, is this helping or hurting your writing? This is something readers often want to know, I think, about writers and their lifestyles right now.
Both. I mean, I don't have a good answer. I don't know. I don't have a good, I think everyone has something that they're struggling with now, right? So there are challenges no matter who you are, no matter what situation you're in, you have your challenges. My particular challenges at the beginning were that my daughter was a junior in college. She's now a senior in college. So she got kicked out of her college dorm. We had to pick her up, and her roommate came to live with us. And they were really, really sad and really devastated to be leaving college like that and not knowing what was going to happen. And my son was in his senior year of high school. And so he had no prom and no graduation. Like my kids were at like kind of crummy time. Not that everybody's kids weren't, like everybody's at a crummy time, but those were my particular specific crummy things. So that made it really hard. And so in the beginning, like my house was a little crazy because my son was there trying to do school. Then my daughter and her roommate were doing Zoom school. And then my daughter's boyfriend came to stay with us for a while too. So we were all of a sudden, I went from being a house of 3 to a house of 6. So like the cooking became like crazy, and we would all be in our separate, doing our separate things, but we all came together for dinner, and cooking dinner like started taking up like my whole day, and cleaning, because like I had a cleaning person come, but I didn't then, I don't still like, so like the cooking and the cleaning for all those people became a huge Herculean task. So I did not start really writing until May, which is when I came to Martha's Vineyard with my son and my husband, and then my son's friend came. So we sort of split up. So we were 3 in New York and 4 in Martha's Vineyard. But in Martha's Vineyard, it's basically one room. Like you can see, we're in one room. And my dog is over there. Well, you can't see him. He's on the couch. Yeah. So I started writing. I was able to write here, but I would just sort of like write outside. But once I got here, I was able to start writing again. But it's not like this amazingly productive time. It's not like I'm sleeping later than I ever used to sleep. I have too many things running around in my brain. I'm trying to get back on track. I'm writing some, but it's not a super productive time. It's okay.
I think it would be, but I think everybody's routines got dismantled and cobbled back together in a new way based on whatever our coping mechanisms were and how family members moved in. Like I had the opposite situation where like I live by myself with a dog, but when the pandemic started, I didn't have Henry, my puppy, so it was just me. And I was like, I will never survive this if I don't do
So
something.
it had to be so hard.
Well, we started the Blaze. And so now like I'm having the opposite experience from everybody else where I work like 12 to 16-hour days and I talk to 25 people a day, which was not a thing for a writer before, where I was like, I need my solitude to write today, you know. But I started getting up early, which I don't do. I just am not a morning person, but I would get up an hour early to start writing before the Blaze meeting so that I could finish something. And I'm the weirdo. Like you hear about the writer who's writing a book in lockdown. Like that's me. And I am not that productive a person, but for some reason I needed this bullet to bite on. So I finished a book, a short book, a memoir about Woodrow, about
I'm so excited. I didn't know if we were allowed to talk about it. I wasn't sure. So yes.
We can. So you guys are the first to know this. I actually turned it into my agent and then she gave it to my editor at Harper and they're going to acquire it. You can hear that from me because it's a secret and I'm not supposed to talk about it. So that's my secret, but should be out next year by around.
I can't wait to read that book. I love
it. My ancient old lab will get out into the world. So yes, that's what I have been working on. And now I'm just going to go back to like sausage making for other writers. And I'm thrilled about that. And you guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know we have to jump off, but thank you, Belmont, for hosting us and giving us this place to meet up. I've loved seeing the chat and the community building over there. And just, you know, we're so lucky to have you. Writers, we're so lucky to have you, right, Lynda?
100%. Thank you. And everyone try to get to your independent bookstores and, you know, they're all like Belmont, they're mailing books. You can go pick up books, try to do what you can to support them because we need them. And when this is over, we're going to really need them. So,
thank you so much.
Be safe. Thank you. Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you, Lynda. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was a really great event. And thank you, everybody, for your great questions, too. Hope you all stay safe and have a great night.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.